If someone had told me a bored billionaire could turn a dare into a proposal, I would have laughed. Rain carved the city into glittering shards, slicking the pavement as Sloane Sterling stepped from her black Maybach, heels striking the wet ground in a sharp, deliberate rhythm. She didn't flinch when thunder cracked overhead. Power never did. And Sloane Sterling was power distilled a billionaire, the youngest CEO in the history of Sterling International. She was forged of steel and secrets, the sort of woman who could ruin lives with a single press of her blood-red fingertip on a touchscreen, which was exactly why the bet was irresistible. Marry her for a month, break her heart and make sure she never forgets it, Vanessa said, laughing lazily from the penthouse bar, a glass of Dom Perignon in hand. Sloane didn't even blink. Just a month? She murmured, the corner of her mouth lifting. That's easy. To Sloane, women were a game. Feelings were leverage. And Maya Page was just another pawn. The girl was naive, soft-spoken, all sunshine and charity work, the kind who trusted too easily and forgave even faster. A perfect target. And besides, Sloane had a point to prove. No one challenged her authority and got away with it. Especially not Maya, who'd embarrassed her publicly by refusing a business grant from Sterling Foundation on ethical grounds. It had made Sloane look cold, inhuman, which ironically she was fine with until it made headlines. So now it was personal. She would seduce Maya, win her trust, marry her in a flash romance for the tabloids, and then destroy her in the most elegant, humiliating way possible. Just a month. Hey, if you're enjoying this story, go ahead and drop a like to help us grow even more. And let me know in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, what score would you give this story so far? Your feedback makes all the difference. She wouldn't feel a thing. At least that's what she told herself. The first time Sloane saw Maya again, she was in that god-awful bookstore on Alder and Wren. The one that smelled like dust and dreams. Maya was there, curled up behind the register, a pen tucked between her lips, reading something with her brow furrowed and her knees drawn up, like she was the softest thing in the universe. Sloane's pulse stuttered. Annoyed, she shook it off. "Miss Page," she said smoothly, her voice like silk over a knife. Maya looked up, and those eyes warm, open, startled. "Miss Sterling. I don't expect much either." Sloane cut in, already stepping closer. "But I hear you've been talking about me in public." Maya blinked, confused. "I just declined a donation." "That's not defamation, comes in many forms." Sloane leaned on the counter close enough to smell vanilla and ink. "But I'm a generous woman. I'm willing to forget it ever happened." Maya narrowed her eyes slightly. "Why would you do that?" "Because I like a challenge." Sloane's smile was predatory. "And you look like one." Maya stiffened. "I'm not for sale, Miss Sterling." "Good," Sloane said. "Because I don't buy, I take." The air between them shifted. Sharp. Electric. Sloane didn't expect the heat. The way Maya's gaze didn't break. The way something flickered in those soft eyes. Not fear. Something else. Defiance. Sloane walked out of the store with Maya's scent burned into her senses. And that night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering why the hell she suddenly couldn't stop thinking about a girl who smelled like paperback pages and stubbornness. 2 days later, Sloane sent flowers to the bookstore, then tickets to an opera, then a dinner invitation handwritten on silk stationery. Maya rejected them all, until the 4th envelope. "Have dinner with me," it said. "Just dinner. No strings, no expectations." The handwriting was hers. Maya showed up in a pale yellow dress that made Sloane forget how to breathe for a full 3 seconds. "This is a mistake," Maya said quietly as they sat across from each other, candles flickering between them. Sloane smiled. "Probably." Maya held her gaze. "But I want to understand you." Sloane raised an eyebrow. "That's your first mistake." And somehow that was how it started. 1 dinner, then 2, then late-night texts and stolen glances. A slow, simmering seduction that Sloane controlled with mechanical precision until the night Maya kissed her first. And something inside Sloane cracked. Not that she'd admit it, because this was still just a game, a bet, a performance. She would marry Maya in a lavish ceremony just for show, and then destroy her in front of everyone. That was the plan. The problem was Maya was making her forget why she ever wanted to win. The wedding was planned in 12 days. 12 days from Maya's tentative yes whispered with trembling lips. After Sloane had spent weeks building something that looked like trust, or at least the illusion of it. Why so fast? Maya had asked, eyes wide, voice barely above a breath. Sloane had cupped her cheek, thumb brushing against skin too soft for this world. Because I know what I want, she'd whispered, lying through her teeth. The truth was, she needed to move quickly before her resolve slipped, before the heat between them got too dangerous, before Maya saw through her, before Sloane stopped wanting to win. She hadn't expected the ceremony to shake her, but it did. There were violins and white roses, a rooftop garden overlooking the skyline, and 1,000 eyes watching as Sloane slid the diamond ring onto Maya's finger with practiced grace. Maya wore a satin dress the color of cream, her hair twisted into something ethereal, and Sloane, for one terrifying second, forgot where she was, forgot everything. The bet, the plan, the cold satisfaction she'd promised herself. She just stared, jaw tight as Maya smiled nervously and whispered, I do. Sloane said it, too. It sounded hollow in her own ears, like someone else's voice. But the world cheered and photographers snapped photos and champagne flowed like water. Sloane smiled for the cameras, kissed Maya's cheek, not her lips, not yet, and held her hand like a trophy. And inside, she felt something fray. That night, in the honeymoon suite of a luxury hotel Sloane had bought just for the occasion, Maya sat on the edge of the massive bed, her shoes off, her dress still perfect, her hands in her lap. Sloane poured herself a whiskey. No expectations, Maya said quietly, not looking at her. Right? Sloane turned slowly. Right? Maya exhaled. Then can I just sleep beside you tonight? No pressure. Sloane downed the drink in one motion. Of course. She wasn't sure which one of them she was lying to. The sheets were cool. Maya curled beside her, spine stiff with nerves, body radiating warmth. Sloane kept her distance until Maya's fingers brushed hers in the dark until Maya whispered, Why me? And Sloane, liar, strategist, manipulator, found herself staring at the ceiling, unable to answer. So she said the first thing that sounded real, because you make me forget how cold the world is. Maya didn't reply, but her fingers stayed tangled with Sloane's until she fell asleep. Weeks passed. The tabloids exploded. Billionaire Sloane Sterling marries local bookstore angel. From boardrooms to bedtime stories, Sloane Sterling's sudden wedding shocks everyone. Sloane's enemies whispered that she'd gone soft. Her board demanded explanations. Her fake marriage was front-page news. But Sloane, she couldn't focus on any of it because Maya was changing everything. Mornings started with coffee and soft laughter. Evenings ended with Maya reading aloud from her favorite books, her head resting on Sloane's shoulder. Sloane never meant to get used to it, but she did. Too fast, too deep, and the guilt started to rot her from the inside. Maya trusted her, believed every soft look, every accidental smile. Every night, Sloane didn't touch her, didn't take what was expected. Maya looked at her with even more tenderness, more hope. It killed her. She started avoiding mirrors because every time she looked, she saw a monster with perfect lipstick. Then came the first real crack, a press event. Maya was supposed to stay home. That was the rule. Sloane's world was sharp edges and cold games. But Maya showed up anyway, uninvited. She wore a black dress and stood beside Sloane like she belonged, like she was proud. Sloane's ex, a socialite with venom in her smile, leaned in and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, You still collecting strays, Vale? Maya froze. Sloane's jaw tightened. The moment stretched fragile, cruel. Then Maya, gentle, golden-hearted Maya, turned to the woman and said with calm fire, "She's not collecting. She's learning how to deserve better." Silence. Sloane stared, stunned. No one had ever defended her like that. Not once. Not ever. Back in the limo, Sloane couldn't stop looking at her. Maya watched the city slide by, serene, unreadable. "You didn't have to do that," Sloane said. "I did." "Why?" "Because maybe you don't see it, Sloane," she said, turning to face her. "But you're not who they say you are. You don't know me." "Then let me." Sloane wanted to kiss her, to run, to scream. Instead she said, "Okay." That night, they didn't sleep on opposite sides of the bed. That night, Sloane kissed her gently, slowly, as if Maya might break. Maya didn't. She kissed back like she was choosing Sloane. And when they fell asleep tangled, breathless, Sloane knew something awful, something irreversible. She was falling, and the end of this bet would ruin them both. Sloane Sterling was not a woman who made mistakes. She built empires from nothing, silenced rivals with a glance, moved through the world as if it owed her reverence. But this thing with Maya was starting to feel less like a mistake and more like a slow, exquisite unspooling. Each morning brought a question she couldn't answer. How a lie had begun to feel so much like truth. Maya drifted through the penthouse like she belonged, barefoot and humming, leaving little trails of soft chaos. A half-finished coffee on the counter, a sweater draped over a chair, a book abandoned at the edge of the tub. Sloane hated disorder. Somehow, Maya's presence didn't feel like a mess. It felt like warmth, like home, which terrified her, because Sloane was still hiding everything, the bet, why she'd started this, the countdown she didn't know how to stop. And every time Maya looked at her with those wide, trusting eyes, Sloane felt the noose tightening. The first real fracture came on a Friday morning. Maya sat at the breakfast table, legs tucked beneath her, hair rumpled from sleep, paging through a book of poems while Sloane skimmed business reports. "Can I ask you something?" Maya said, without looking up. "Of course. Why did you really marry me?" Sloane's hand stilled. Her pulse jabbed once, hard. "I already told you. I wanted to. You barely knew me." Maya finally met her eyes. "People like you don't do things like that without a reason." Sloane's smile was tight. "Maybe you're the exception." Maya studied her, silent. "I want to believe that," she said. "I really do." She stood and walked away, leaving Sloane breathless. That night, Sloane didn't sleep. Maya's voice looped in her head, "I want to believe that," until the guilt, cold and heavy, cinched around her chest like a vice. The next day, she canceled 3 meetings and followed Maya to the bookstore. It was a Saturday, the place softly buzzing with regulars. Sloane stood in the doorway, watching Maya laugh with a little girl in pigtails, kneeling to help her find a fairy tale. It was disarming, painful, pure. Maya looked up and saw her, and smiled, the real kind. The kind Sloane didn't deserve. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to see you," Sloane said. "Is that allowed?" "Of course." Maya's eyes softened. "You just never come here." "Maybe I should," Sloane murmured. "You look happy here." "I am." Maya tilted her head. "But I'm happier with you." That shouldn't have hurt, but it did. Sloane wasn't supposed to be her happiness. She was supposed to be the storm that wrecked her. She reached out, brushed Maya's cheek with the back of her fingers. "Let me take you away tonight," she said softly. "Somewhere quiet, just us." Maya hesitated, then nodded. "Okay." They drove upstate to a cabin Sloane owned but never used. It was buried in pine trees and silence, with no cell reception and no staff, just them. Maya stepped inside and let out a soft gasp. "This place is beautiful." Sloane watched her move, touching things gently, reverently, like she was afraid to break the moment. Over dinner, they talked about nothing and everything. Sloane let Maya see pieces of her that no one else ever had. Her childhood, her loneliness, her fear of becoming the monster everyone already believed she was. Maya listened. No judgment, no pity, just presence. Later, by the fireplace, Maya curled up beside her, head on her shoulder. "I never thought I'd fall in love like this," she whispered. Sloane froze. "What?" Maya looked up, eyes luminous. "With you, I think I'm falling for you." The words hit like a knife between the ribs. Sloane swallowed hard. "Maya, you don't have to say it back," Maya said quickly, almost embarrassed. "I just wanted you to know." Sloane couldn't breathe. She couldn't speak because she wanted to say it back. God, she wanted to, but she knew the second she did, the truth would start bleeding out. So instead, she kissed Maya, soft, desperate, like maybe she could bury the guilt underwent. That night, they made love for the first time. No games, no distance, just skin and breath, and the raw ache of something real. Sloane held her afterwards, Maya's head resting over her heart, and for the first time in her life, Sloane wished she weren't who she was. Wished she'd never made the damn bet, because now she was into deep. And Maya was falling for someone who didn't exist. The next morning, Sloane found Maya outside standing barefoot on the grass, staring out at the trees. "You okay?" Sloane asked. Maya didn't turn round. "I need to ask you something again." Sloane's stomach tightened. "Okay. If I asked you to walk away from everything, your empire, your money, your company, would you do it?" Sloane laughed, more out of nerves than humor. "What kind of question is that?" Maya turned to face her, and for the first time, there was no softness in her eyes. Just steel, a real one. Sloane stared at her. "What are you trying to say?" Maya's voice was quiet. "I think I know what this is." What is this marriage? Me? Why you chose me?" Sloane's mouth went dry. Maya stepped closer. "I think I know. I just want to hear you say it." Sloane Sterling had never frozen in front of a confrontation. Not once. Not with ruthless CEOs. Not with shareholders. Not even when federal investigations hovered like vultures over her company during a hostile takeover. But standing there barefoot in the grass with the morning sun brushing over Maya's skin, like the world itself loved her. She couldn't move, couldn't speak. "Say what?" she asked low and careful, like she could still steer the moment away from the cliff it was heading toward. Maya's eyes didn't flinch. "The truth." Sloane swallowed. "You're going to have to be more specific." Maya took a slow step forward. "Did you marry me because of a bet?" Silence dropped like a bomb. Sloane's pulse slammed into her throat. Her mouth opened, then shut. She felt her face shift, a micro-expression she couldn't control. And Maya saw it. She saw it. Her entire body changed, like something inside her had snapped into place. "I knew it," Maya whispered. It wasn't anger in her voice. It was heartbreak. Worse. "How long?" she asked, voice trembling, but steady. "From the start." Sloane said nothing. Maya's breath hitched. She blinked fast like her tears were begging to fall, but she refused to give them that satisfaction. "So what, Sloane? You picked me out like some charity case. You pretended to fall for me just to win a stupid game." Sloane finally found her voice. "Too late. Too broken." "It wasn't, Maya. It didn't stay like that." "I didn't mean don't," Maya said sharply, voice rising. "Don't you dare twist this. You lied to me. You let me fall for you. You let me touch you, sleep next to you, trust you." Her voice cracked on the last word and Sloane stepped forward instinctively. "Maya, don't." Maya stepped back. "Did you ever plan to tell me?" Sloane's silence was louder than any answer. "I see," Maya said, voice hollow. "So, this is the part where I'm supposed to be humiliated, right? Where you get to tell your friends you broke me?" "No," Sloane whispered, shaking her head. "God, no. It stopped being about them a long time ago. I never meant to hurt you, but you did." Maya's voice was ice now. Every word, every kiss, every time you held me. It was all calculated, wasn't it? No. Sloane took a step forward. Not after the first night. Not after I really saw you. Then why didn't you stop? Because I didn't know how. Sloane's voice cracked open, rage and desperation pouring through the gap. Because I started wanting you and hating myself at the same time. Because every day I got closer and didn't know how to undo it. Because I fell for you, too. Maya banned. By the time I realized what I'd done, it was already too late. Maya stared at her, stunned. You don't get to say that. It's the truth. No, Sloane. It's convenient. Her hands were shaking now. I don't know what hurts more, the betrayal or the fact that I believed in you. Sloane stepped closer again, pleading in her voice. Now, Maya, please. I will fix this. I'll do anything. I'll go public. I'll tell them all the truth. You'll what? Undo the wedding. Erase the nights I spent thinking this was real. Fix my heart like it's a press release you can spin. I love you, Sloane said, voice breaking for the first time in years. You don't. Maya's voice was so quiet it burned. You love the version of me you could control. The one you thought wouldn't find out. The one who existed in your game. Sloane's hands were trembling now. That's not true. Then prove it. Maya crossed her arms. Tell the world the truth. Step down from Sterling International. Give up the empire that made you this woman. Start over for real with me. The words hit like a whip. Sloane felt her soul recoil. You're asking me to destroy everything I've built. I'm asking you to be someone worth loving. Sloane said nothing. Her silence was the answer. Maya's eyes shone now, but she didn't cry. You can keep your empire, she said, voice like frost. I'm done being part of the foundation it's built on. She turned and walked into the cabin. Sloane stood there frozen in the quiet as the door closed behind her. That night, Maya was gone. No note, no call, just the echo of her absence stretching through the empty rooms. Sloane tore through the cabin, through her own thoughts, through everything she'd ever told herself about control and power and strategy. None of it mattered. She'd had love, raw, real, breathtaking love. And she destroyed it because she was too afraid to let herself be known, too afraid to give it a name. And now she didn't know how to get Maya back. She just knew she had to, because the only thing worse than losing was living without her. And Sloane Sterling had finally lost something she couldn't buy back. Sloane Sterling didn't go back to the city. Not immediately. She stayed in a cabin for 3 days, surrounded by silence and memory. Every corner held echoes of Maya. Her laugh in the kitchen, her warmth in the sheets, her voice saying, I think I'm falling for you. Sloane couldn't erase it, couldn't escape it. She barely ate, didn't sleep. For the first time in her life, the world didn't revolve around her power, her money, her control. For the first time, she felt utterly powerless, and she deserved it. On the 4th morning, she drove back to Harbor City, eyes bloodshot, jaw tight, heart dragging behind her like a corpse. The city hadn't changed. Her office still stood like a monument to everything she'd built, glass and steel and fear. But Sloane didn't go to work. She didn't call her assistant, didn't check the headlines. She went home alone. The penthouse felt cold now, sterile like a mausoleum to the life she ruined. Maya's things were gone. Her books, her sweaters, the mismatched mugs she brought from the bookstore. All of it vanished. The only thing left was her scent. And Sloane stood in the center of the room, breathing it in like punishment. Then she did the one thing she never thought she would. She opened her private vault. Inside were files, contracts, acquisitions, non-disclosure agreements, and at the very bottom, a single red envelope. The original terms of the bet. A marriage, a public humiliation, a win. She stared at it for a long time. Then she lit it on fire. Watched it burn in the kitchen sink until the ash swirled like dust from a former life. That same night, she called a press conference. Her board tried to stop her. Her lawyers begged her not to speak. There's no reason to throw everything away over a scandal that hasn't even hit yet, they said. It's already hit, Sloane answered. You just haven't felt the impact. The press room was full. Cameras, lights, whispers. Sloane stood at the podium in a black suit. No jewelry, no makeup, just her raw, sleepless face. She didn't read a statement, didn't deflect. She looked directly into the flashing lights and said, I married Maya Page under false pretenses. It was a manipulation. A bet. I did it to hurt her. Gasps rippled through the crowd. But I fell in love with her. Sloane continued, voice unwavering. And by the time I realized what I'd done, it was too late. So, this is not damage control. It's confession. And I'm stepping down as CEO of Sterling International effective immediately. Shouts exploded from the back. Reporters stood waving microphones. Why now? Is she suing you? Are you being blackmailed? Sloane raised a hand. I'm doing this because it's the only thing left I can do right. Maya didn't deserve what I did. She deserves the truth. And if there's any chance she's watching, I want her to know. She paused, emotions slicing through her throat. I am not asking for forgiveness. I just want her to know I'm not hiding anymore. She walked off the stage, left the building, left everything. But Maya didn't call, didn't come. Days passed. Sloane waited like a penitent sinner outside a locked chapel. She didn't try to find her. She didn't beg. She knew Maya would come to her if she ever wanted to. She just didn't expect what came instead. A letter, no return address, no signature, but she knew the handwriting. You don't get to fix this with a headline. You don't get to say sorry in front of cameras and expect everything to change. But I saw your eyes. I saw your face. And part of me still wants to believe you meant it. So here's your chance. Prove you're not the woman who made that bet. Prove it in silence. Prove it when no one is watching. Sloane folded the letter with shaking hands. It smelled faintly like paper and rain. And for the first time in weeks, her heart beat with something close to hope. She didn't know where Maya was, but she knew what she had to do. She sold her penthouse, donated the profits to the community literacy program Maya once mentioned. She dissolved two of her most controversial subsidiaries, companies that exploited labor overseas. Ones Maya had criticized before. She disappeared from the tabloids, from social media, from the world. And every day she woke up in a small one-bedroom apartment in the East Village with no staff, no luxury, no empire, just a journal. And Maya's letter. She didn't chase. She didn't beg. She became the kind of woman who could be worth loving. Quietly, consistently, alone, and somewhere in the city. Maya Page watched, heard, waited. Sloane Sterling had never lived like this. The floor of the apartment creaked. The radiator clanked like an old man coughing. The walls were thin, and she could hear her upstairs neighbor singing badly to Whitney Houston every morning. There was no driver, no private chef, no staff pressing her clothes or arranging her schedule. She did her own laundry, burned her own toast, and she still woke up every day with Maya's letter beside her bed, folded into perfect thirds. The crease soft from being opened too many times. Prove it in silence. Those words haunted her, grounded her, guided her. She didn't try to find Maya. She didn't go near the bookstore. But some mornings she walked past it on the other side of the street, her hood up, hands deep in her pockets, just to feel close, just to look through the windows and see if Maya was there. Sometimes she was, sometimes not. On the days she wasn't, Sloane's chest ached like something was missing in her ribs. On the days she was, Sloane would stop for exactly 10 seconds, count them slowly, then keep walking because this wasn't about chasing. This was about changing. Months passed. Winter crept in. The world moved on from the scandal. Another celebrity broke the internet. Another politician lied. People forgot. But Sloane didn't. Her mornings started with cold coffee and job applications. No one wanted to hire her, not the real her, the version stripped of power of reputation. But she kept trying. Eventually, she got a part-time gig at a nonprofit Maya once mentioned, literacy programs for underserved youth. She filed papers, made copies, picked up lunch orders for interns 10 years younger than her, and every time someone said, "You look like that billionaire woman," she smiled and said, "I used to." The pay was minimum wage. The reward was something she didn't have a name for yet. It happened during one of the book drives at the Brookmere Community Center. She was unpacking boxes of worn children's books, hair tied back, no makeup, sleeves rolled to her elbows when a familiar voice came from behind her. "You never belonged in the penthouse." Her hands stopped. The sound shot down her spine like lightning. She turned slowly. Maya stood near the door, arms crossed, face unreadable. Sloane's throat tightened. "Maya, you belonged here," Maya said quietly. "With people. With purpose." Sloane didn't move, didn't breathe. "You've been watching?" she asked, voice low. Maya nodded. "I didn't want to. I tried not to. But people talk. I heard what you did, what you gave up." Sloane looked at her hands. "It doesn't undo what I did to you." "No," Maya said, "but it tells me you meant it." Sloane stepped forward, cautious. "Why are you here?" Maya hesitated. "Because I don't know if I'm ready to forgive you." Sloane nodded. "I understand, but I needed to see you with my own eyes." Maya's gaze softened, just slightly. "You look smaller." Sloane blinked. "Smaller? Not physically. Less untouchable. Less armored. That's probably because I haven't slept in weeks." Maya's mouth flickered. "You used to be terrifying." "I still am." "No," Maya said. "You're human now." Sloane's voice cracked. "You make me want to be." Silence stretched between them, raw, electric. Maya moved closer and stopped a few feet away. "I'm not here to fix you, Sloane. I know. And I'm not here to fall back into something toxic. I don't want that anymore. I don't know what I want," Maya admitted. "But I miss you." The words hit Sloane square in the chest. "I miss you, too," she whispered. Maya looked down. "I think about that night at the cabin. The way you looked at me like you couldn't believe I was real." Sloane stepped closer. "You were the only real thing in my life." Their eyes locked, and for a heartbeat the world paused. Maya reached into her bag and pulled out a battered copy of Jane Eyre. "You left this at the penthouse." Sloane took it with trembling hands. "I've read it 3 times since you left." "Did it end differently?" "No," Sloane said, "but I understood it better." Maya nodded. "Maybe we'll understand us better, too." Then she turned and walked away, only this time she looked back once. And Sloane knew the wall was cracking. The door wasn't open, but it wasn't locked anymore. It wasn't locked anymore, but it wasn't open either, and Sloane Sterling knew that if she barreled through, Maya would slam it for good. So she waited, carefully, respectfully, painfully. She went to work. She shelved books. She rode quiet subway cars instead of reclining in the back of luxury sedans. She paid bills late sometimes, bought groceries with exact change. It was humbling, grounding, necessary. She didn't see Maya again for almost 3 weeks. Then, on a Friday afternoon, a paper bag sat on the steps of her building. Inside, a sandwich from her favorite cafe, a thermos of jasmine tea, and a single note. "You forgot lunch again." I asked around. A Sloane sat on the concrete, heart thudding like it wanted out of her chest. She read the note 10 times, memorized the curve of Maya's handwriting the way it was signed with just a, the smallest olive branch. The next day, Sloane returned the gesture. She left a used copy of The Bell Jar outside the bookstore with a note tucked between pages 112 and 113. "Don't forget to eat. You forget when you're sad." No signature. No expectation. Just one moment. Then another. A week later, she opened her mailbox to find a folded newspaper article. An interview Maya gave to a small literary blog. Someone had circled her quote in red ink. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about deciding that someone's growth matters more than your pain. Sloane touched the paper like it might burn her. Her chest had in a way that didn't feel like punishment anymore. It felt like longing. Please, she wrote on a scrap of paper. The next time she passed the bookstore. Let me prove I can give you something without taking anything from you. She left it tucked behind the gardenia plant outside the shop. The next day, there was a sticky note on the gardenia's pot. Tuesday, 7 p.m. The library on Briar Street. Don't be late. Sloane arrived at 6:45, heart hammering. It was a tiny public library, almost forgotten by the city, with peeling walls and flickering lights. Maya was already there, seated in a corner, flipping through a poetry collection. She looked up as Sloane approached, her expression unreadable. Sloane sat across from her without a word. For a while, they just read in silence. Pages turned, clocks ticked, and then Maya spoke softly. You're the only person who ever made me question whether love was safe. Sloane looked at her hands. I don't expect you to feel safe with me. I just want to give you the chance to walk away whenever you need to. Maya closed the book. I don't want to walk away. I want not need to. Sloane met her gaze. Then let me show you I can be someone who doesn't hurt you. Show me how. By staying. By not asking for anything. By being there when you look and silent when you don't. Maya leaned back watching her. You know, it wasn't just the lie that broke me. What was it? It was the way you looked at me like I was yours. Like I mattered. Like I was. She hesitated. Special. You were. But not enough to stop. Sloane's voice cracked. I know. And I will regret that for the rest of my life. Maya looked away. I don't need you to grovel. I'm not, Sloane said. I'm grieving for what I ruined. Maya nodded slowly. I can't promise anything. I'm not asking for a promise. Just a little more of your time. A long silence passed. The kind that said everything to hearts couldn't yet say aloud. Then Maya slid a folded piece of paper across the table. Sloane opened it. It was a schedule. Volunteer reading sessions at the library. Tuesday nights. We could use a second reader. Maya said the kids love stories, but they don't get a lot of happy endings. Sloane swallowed hard. I'm good at reading aloud. Not too good. Maya said, a flicker of teasing in her voice. Don't make me look bad. It was small. It was nothing. But to Sloane, it was everything. That night, Sloane didn't go home right away. She walked through the city with a paper in her coat pocket, clutched like a prayer. At a red light, she caught her reflection in a storefront window. She almost didn't recognize herself. Her edges were softer, her eyes less hollow. The cold around her had started to melt. Not because she'd won anything, but because she'd stopped trying to. The next Tuesday, she showed up 15 minutes early. Maya was already there. Sloane sat beside her on the rug as children trickled in, wide-eyed and full of energy. Maya started the session with a picture book, reading with gentle inflection. The kids were mesmerized. Sloane took over halfway through, her voice steady, warm. The children laughed, leaned in. Maya watched her quiet. After the session, as they cleaned up crayon wrappers and stacked books, Maya spoke without looking at her. You're good with them. They're honest, Sloane said. They know when you're lying. Maya smiled faintly. Yeah, they do. Sloane reached for the last crumpled page and froze. It was a drawing, a childish, messy sketch of two women holding hands under a rainbow. One wore a crown. The other had a book. Maya glanced at it, then at Sloane. Their eyes met, and this time neither of them looked away. It was never about grand gestures now. Not anymore. The rhythm between them had shifted into something softer, smaller, like the slow, careful stitching of a wound that had once bled too freely. Sloane didn't expect to be invited into Maya's life. She accepted crumbs, quiet Tuesday nights reading to children, brief conversations between stacks of books, the rare glance that lingered too long before one of them looked away. But those moments began to accumulate slowly, secretly, intimately. One Thursday afternoon, Sloane found a voicemail on her phone. Maya's voice, soft and almost unsure. "I'm staying late at the shop tonight. Inventory stuff. There's leftover soup if you want some. I mean, you don't have to. Just if you're cold." Sherry played the message 6 times before replying. "I'm always cold. I'll be there." That night, the bookstore was dim, lit only by a few scattered lamps. Maya sat cross-legged on the floor behind the counter, boxes of books open around her, sleeves pushed up to her elbows. Sloane stood in the doorway, heart thudding, until Maya looked up. "You came," she said. Sloane stepped inside, closed the door behind her. "You offered soup." "I'm not a monster." Maya arched an eyebrow. "That's debatable." Sloane smiled, tentative. Maya pointed to a thermos and a chipped ceramic bowl on the counter. "Don't say I never give you anything." Sloane sat, poured, tasted. It was good, too good. "You're trying to poison me with affection." Maya's expression shifted. Not quite a smile, not quite a warning. It wouldn't take much. Silence stretched between them. Safe, heavy. Sloane glanced around at the chaos of open boxes. "You need help." Maya shrugged. "I've got a system, but I wouldn't say no to company." So, they worked together. Sloane sorted books by genre while Maya labeled them, their hands occasionally brushing, their eyes meeting in moments that made the air grow thick with unspoken things. At one point, Sloane pulled out a worn-out romance novel with a ripped cover and held it up. "You still stock this one?" Maya glanced at it. "It's cheesy, predictable, full of cliches." Then she took it from Sloane's hand. "But yeah, people love it. Happy endings are a rare kind of hope." Sloane studied her. "Do you believe in them?" Maya's voice dropped. "I didn't. Not for a while." Sloane swallowed. "Because of me." Maya nodded. "You didn't just lie to me. You rewrote me. You turned me into a prop in someone else's game." Sloane's throat tightened. "I hate that I ever made you feel small." "You didn't make me feel small," Maya said, eyes piercing. "You made me feel like I wasn't real, like everything I was. My choices, my boundaries, my heart was just background noise for your story." Sloane stepped closer. "I see you now. You should have seen me then." "I know." Sloane's voice cracked. "I look at you and I see the girl who held my hand in bed and didn't ask me to give anything. I wasn't ready to. The girl who defended me at a party where everyone hated me. The girl who made me want to be someone better, and I crushed her." Maya was quiet for a long time. "She's still here," she whispered, "but she's different now. Stronger, angrier, smarter." Sloane nodded. "She deserves everything." Maya looked up at her. "What about you? What do you think you deserve?" "Not you," Sloane said instantly. "Not after what I did." "Then why are you still trying?" "Because I want you anyway. Even if I never deserve you. Even if I never get to kiss you again. Even if I only get your silence or your friendship or nothing at all. I still want to spend my whole life proving I'm no longer the woman who married you for a lie." Maya stared at her. Then slowly she stood. Sloane stood too. They were close now. Close enough to feel the heat, the ache, the history. Maya reached up gently and touched Sloane's face, brushing her thumb across the hollow beneath her eye. "You look tired," she murmured. Sloane closed her eyes. "I haven't slept since the day you walked out." Maya exhaled. "I haven't breathed right since that day." Sloane opened her eyes. "Then maybe we're still broken in the same places." Maya's touch lingered. Her fingers slid into Sloane's hair, slow, hesitant, almost trembling. "If I kiss you now," she said, "it won't be forgiveness. I don't want forgiveness. It won't be a promise either." "Then what?" Sloane whispered. Maya leaned in, her lips just a breath away. "It'll just be now." Sloane didn't move, didn't speak. She let Maya close the last inch. Let her kiss her. Soft, careful, like they were testing the shape of something that could never be rushed again. It wasn't fire. It wasn't lust. It was something deeper. Something broken and rebuilding at the same time. When they pulled apart, Maya didn't let go. Her forehead pressed to Sloane's. "Stay," she whispered. "Just for tonight. Always." Sloane breathed, but Maya shook her head. "No promises. Not yet. Just stay." Sloane nodded. And she did. Morning crept in gently, casting amber light across the creaky floorboards of the bookstore, where Sloane's sterling lay still beside the woman she once broke, and was now learning slowly, painfully how to hold again without damage. Maya hadn't said much after the kiss. She hadn't needed words. In the small hours after, her fingers threaded with Sloane's, anchoring them both in a fragile sliver of time that didn't claim to mend the past, only dared to believe in something new. Sloane slept like she hadn't in months, no shame spiking her pulse, no regret clawing the edges, just the soft steadiness of Maya's breath wrapped around her. But morning brings questions, and questions, Sloane knew, rarely leave without drawing blood. Maya stirred beside her, hair a tangled halo, eyes blinking into the light. "Did you stay all night?" she murmured. Sloane nodded. "You told me to." "I told you to stay for tonight." Maya rolled toward her, a hint of tease in her voice. "Not every night." Sloane's smile was small. "I'm learning boundaries slowly. Good, because I'm not rushing this. I'm not ready to rewrite us yet." "I don't want to rewrite us," Sloane said, easing a strand of hair from Maya's cheek. "I want a blank page. The part where the ink hasn't bled." Maya studied her, long and deep. "Then don't make the same mistakes again." "I won't." "Even so," Maya's expression wavered. "Some part of me still waits for the other shoe to drop." It landed hard. Sloane pushed up slowly, an ache sawing through her chest. "I don't want you to live afraid of me." "It isn't fear," Maya said softly. "It's memory, muscle memory, like touching a scar you forgot about until someone presses too hard." Sloane lowered her gaze. "You're allowed to hesitate," Maya added. "I'm trying to move past it, but it's not easy. You hurt me in ways I didn't know I could be hurt." "Then I'll take the time," Sloane said. "Whatever you need. No pressure, no demands, just space to heal, together." Maya nodded but didn't answer, and Sloane understood. Healing wouldn't be quick. Damage never leaves you the same. It only teaches you a new way to carry yourself. Except the world had never let Sloane carry anything without trying to rip it from her, especially her past, especially Vanessa Devereux. It happened the following Friday. Sloane was leaving the library after her weekly reading session when she saw the silhouette she knew too well, leaned against a black car, sunglasses high, red mouth curved like a blade. "You've gone domestic," Vanessa said. "Adorable." Sloane went still. "What do you want?" "You, obviously. Or the version of you that wasn't a walking redemption arc. She doesn't exist anymore." "Oh, honey." Vanessa slid off her shades, eyes like flint. "She never existed, but you played her beautifully. And now you're tossing it all away for a girl who used to cry over dog-eared poetry books." "Don't talk about her." "I will, because she ruined you. You were cold, calculated, perfect. Look at you now, reading to children, napping in bookstores, drinking cheap coffee like you've got nothing to lose." "I don't," Sloane said evenly, "because I already lost everything. And for the first time, I learned what I want, which isn't you." The silence cut. A hairline crack splintered Vanessa's smile. "I gave you that bet, Sloane. I handed you the match you used to burn her down. Don't pretend you were some victim of fate. You were built for this." Sloane stepped closer, voice low and razor true. "You're right. I took the match. I lit it. I watched it burn. And now I'm rebuilding, not for you, not as anyone's entertainment. For her. For me. Because I'm done waking up with ash in my mouth." "So what now?" Vanessa mocked. "You'll write her poems, plant trees, and beg for scraps of forgiveness?" "No," Sloane said. "I'm going to earn her. Quietly. Honestly. And if she never chooses me again, I'll still be better than I was when I was yours. Vanessa's face darkened. You think she'll forgive you because you play humble? She already kissed me, Sloane said. That wasn't forgiveness. That was hope. And you've never known the difference. She turned and walked away, heart pounding, hands shaking not with fear, but release. Maya was worth all of it. The humiliation, the tearing down, the rebuilding. But Vanessa wasn't finished. That night, an anonymous email arrived. No message, just attachments, photos, screenshots, proof. The original terms of the bet. The party where it was made. Audio of Sloane's own voice, laughing. She's so soft. I could marry her in a week and have her crying by the end of the month. Sloane's blood iced. No threat, no request. Just evidence enough to detonate everything to break Maya all over again. The next day, Sloane walked into the bookstore, printed sheets trembling in her hand. Maya stood behind the counter, hair in a loose braid, humming. She looked up and smiled until she saw Sloane's face. What happened? Sloane set the pages down on the counter. These exist, she said quietly. Maya looked down, her face palled. She flipped through the images, her hands steady, her eyes not. She recognized the voices, the laughter, the truth. Again, Sloane watched her unravel in silence, watched her fight to hold her composure. Is this what you were afraid of? Maya asked. That someone else would break it for us? Sloane nodded. Yes, and I know what you're thinking. That I should have told you. That I should have burned these before anyone else could. But I couldn't. Not this time. Not again. Maya folded the pages, placed them gently aside, then looked up. Her voice was calm, too calm. Do you still talk to her? No. Did you know she'd do this? I hoped she wouldn't, but you weren't surprised. Sloane didn't answer. She didn't have to. Maya stared at her for a long time, then said, You need to go. Sloane's heart cracked. Maya, not forever. Just right now. I need space. Will you? I don't know. Maya whispered. I want to believe we're past this. But some scars don't fade when you keep reopening them. Sloane nodded, backed away, walked out the door again. But this time she didn't feel like she was being punished. She felt like she was being tested, and if Maya needed space, she would give it for as long as it took. Maya Page didn't cry. Not this time. She sat alone in the back office of the bookstore. The printed pages spread out in front of her, proof of a past that wouldn't die quietly. Her hands rested palm down on the desk, steady, though the storm inside her had begun again. Violent and loud and ancient. Sloane's voice echoed in her mind. I wanted you anyway, even if I never deserved you. But that voice was layered now, blended with another, a darker, cruel version. She's so soft. I could marry her in a week and have her crying by the end of the month. That version of Sloane had existed once, had smiled through deception, touched her gently while planning her downfall. And Maya had loved her, trusted her. Maya stared at the evidence. A photograph of Sloane with her head thrown back in laughter at some rooftop party. The audio transcribed word for word, emotions stripped to syllables. She read it all again and again, not to torture herself, but to remember, because moving forward without facing the truth would be another kind of lie. And Maya Page refused to lie to herself again. Outside the bookstore was quiet. She'd closed early, turned the sign, turned off the music. The only sound was the ticking of the old wall clock. You need to go, she had said to Sloane. Not out of hatred, not out of fear, but because if Sloane had stayed, she might have forgiven her to fast again. And Maya couldn't afford to keep loving a woman who hadn't yet proven that she could stand beside her through fire without relighting it. For 2 days, Maya stayed silent. No messages, no letters, no visits. She didn't walk by the East Village apartment, didn't ask mutual friends. She didn't have to. She knew where Sloane was, knew she was waiting. Quietly, Maya hated how much she missed her, but missing someone wasn't a reason to return, So she did something else instead. She packed a bag, left the bookstore in the hands of a trusted friend, and drove upstate to the same cabin where everything had unraveled, and where, in a way, everything had begun. The air was colder now. Leaves scattered across the porch in shades of orange and rust. Maya unlocked the door and stepped inside, the scent of wood and memory flooding her senses. The same fireplace, the same floorboards, the same silence. She lit a fire, sat on the rug, let herself remember. The first kiss, the soft confession. I think I'm falling for you. The betrayal, the ruin, and then the rebuilding. Maya opened her journal, not the one she kept at the shop. The private one, the one Sloane had never seen. She wrote for hours. Everything. The truth of her love, the depth of her hurt, the fury, the hope. She wrote until her fingers cramped and her eyes burned. And then, only then, did she allow herself to cry. Not because of the betrayal, but because of the possibility that she might still want to love her. That was the most terrifying part. She wanted Sloane still. Even now, not the polished version, not the CEO or the monster or the myth, but this Sloane. The one who was rebuilding without applause, who had walked away from her empire, who had brought her evidence of her own crime and said, I want to do this right. On the third morning, Maya drove back into the city. She didn't call first, didn't warn. She just walked up the stairs to the apartment Sloane now rented above a noisy diner, the same one that smelled like grease and second chances, and knocked. No answer. She knocked again. Then the door opened. Sloane stood there in sweatpants and a t-shirt, hair messy, eyes tired. Real Maya, she breathed, voice already frayed. Are you? I'm not here to scream, Maya said. I'm not here to collapse either. Sloane stood back, let her in. Did you read it all? She asked every word, and Maya turned to face her. I hated it, and I'm still here. Sloane swallowed. Why? Because you brought it to me. She paused. Because you didn't hide. Because the woman who made that bed is gone. Sloane stepped closer like she couldn't believe it. Are you saying no? Maya cut in gently. I'm not saying I forgive you. Not yet. But I'm saying I believe you now and I want to try again. Sloane's breath caught. Maya slowly. Maya said on my terms, with honesty, with care, and with the understanding that the moment I feel myself disappearing again, I will walk away. Sloane reached for her hand, but didn't close the distance. Can I touch you? Maya hesitated, then stepped into her, wrapped her arms around Sloane's waist, let her rest her forehead against her shoulder. I've missed you so much it hurt. Maya whispered, every second. Sloane held her then, not tightly, not possessively, just there, steady, reverent. They didn't kiss. They didn't make promises. They just stood breathing each other in. It was the beginning of something fragile, raw, unwritten, a slow rebirth. The fire hadn't gone out, but it had learned to warm instead of burn. They didn't call it a second chance. That phrase felt too clean, too packaged, like it came wrapped with a bow and a guarantee. What Sloane and Maya had now was messier, slower, something between a restart and a reckoning. They moved like people walking barefoot through broken glass, cautious, deliberate, flinching when old scars were pressed just a little too hard. Sloane didn't stay the night. She didn't even ask to. After that quiet, soul-deep embrace in her apartment, she let Maya go, opened the door for her, watched her leave with hands curled into fists, aching to hold her again. But wanting her wasn't the point anymore. Respecting her was. Maya texted her the next morning. There's a poetry reading tonight at the shop. I think you'd like it. No pressure, Sloane replied simply. If you're there, I'll like it. That night, she arrived early, helped Maya move chairs and string up soft lights. They didn't talk about the past. They didn't talk about anything heavy at all. Just books, music, the best flavors of tea. But Sloane noticed the way Maya's eyes lingered on her mouth sometimes. The way her fingers brushed Sloane's wrist when passing her something. The way she caught herself smiling only to look away like it had been a mistake. There was still heat between them, but it had changed. It wasn't fire threatening to consume them anymore. It was the slow burning kind. The kind that kept you warm through the hardest winter. Halfway through the reading, Maya introduced the next poet and stepped aside. Sloane stood near the back, hands folded in front of her, watching Maya's profile in the low light. The shape of her concentration, the softness in her shoulders when she relaxed. It hit her all over again. How much she'd almost lost. How much she still had to earn. After the crowd left, after the last cup of chai was poured and the last folding chair put away, Maya turned to her. "Walk me home." "Always," Sloane said. They walked in silence at first, the city alive around them. Sloane kept a respectful distance, but every part of her was tuned to Maya. The sound of her breath, the shifting of her hands, the way her hair moved in the breeze. "Do you still have it?" Maya asked suddenly. "The letter I wrote you. I read it every morning." Maya was quiet for a moment. "Why?" "Because it's not a love letter," Sloane said. "It's a map of all the places I broke you, of all the places I need to be better." Maya looked at her. "And do you think you're getting better?" Sloane hesitated. "I think I'm finally telling the truth, even when it's ugly, even when it makes me smaller than I used to be." "That's not smaller," Maya said. "That's real." They reached Maya's building. She stopped at the steps. "Want to come up?" Sloane's heart jumped. "Only if you want me to." "I'm not asking you to stay," Maya said. I'd like company just for a little while." Sloane followed her up. The apartment was dim, quiet, full of Maya's softness, plants, candles, half-freed books stacked on the windowsill. Sloane stood awkwardly by the door. Maya motioned for her to sit on the couch, then disappeared into the kitchen. She returned with 2 mugs of mint tea and sat beside her. Not close, not far, just there. "You used to lie without blinking," Maya said, holding her cup. "Even your kindness felt like it had strings." "I know. And now, Sloane said softly, "I'm trying to love you without conditions, even if it means watching you fall out of love with me." Maya closed her eyes. "I never fell out of love." Sloane froze. "I tried." Maya continued. "I wanted to. I needed to. But I never did." "Then why?" "Because love wasn't enough," Maya said. "Not when it came with betrayal." Sloane nodded chest tight. And now Maya set her cup down, turned to her. "Now I want to see if we can have love and truth. If the second time can be built with both of us holding the weight." Sloane's voice was barely a whisper. "I'll hold whatever you let me." Maya looked at her for a long, quiet moment. Then she reached out slowly, gently, and took Sloane's hand. "Don't rush this." "I won't. Don't try to make up for the past with flowers and speeches. I know. Just be here. Be real. And when it's hard, don't run." "I'll stay." Maya nodded. "Then I think we can try." Sloane leaned forward, forehead resting against Maya's. They didn't kiss. They didn't need to. Their hands stayed joined, hearts tangled in the hush between words. It wasn't a second chance. It was a first attempt finally done right. They didn't fall back into each other. They walked slowly, step by trembling step. Each glance, each shared silence, each accidental laugh was a fragile thread that reconnected what had once been shredded. Sloane was careful with her hands now. She didn't reach for Maya unless invited. She didn't linger too long when they brushed fingers passing a cup, or when their legs touched on the subway ride home from the library. She gave Maya the space to want her again. And Maya didn't know what scared her more. That she still wanted Sloane, or that maybe she was falling even harder this time. Because this wasn't the fantasy anymore. This was the real flawed, haunted version of the woman who'd once broken her. And Maya was seeing pieces of Sloane no one else ever had. Like the way she flinched when someone raised their voice, even if it wasn't at her. Or the way she sometimes forgot to eat, lost in self-punishment until Maya placed food gently in front of her. Or the quiet way Sloane would whisper, "Are you okay?" Every time Maya fell silent for too long, as if she couldn't bear another goodbye. They hadn't kissed again, not since that night in the apartment. But they were closer now than they'd ever been before. Not physically, emotionally. There was no mask left, no armor. And for Maya, that vulnerability was intoxicating and terrifying. On the night of Sloane's birthday, a date Maya had once known but hadn't celebrated since the fallout, she showed up at Sloane's tiny apartment holding a small box wrapped in plain paper and tied with twine. "You remembered?" Sloane whispered, stunned. "I almost didn't come," Maya admitted. "I was afraid you'd think it meant more than I'm ready to give." "It means everything," Sloane said, stepping back to let her in. "Whatever it is, however long you stay." Maya walked inside, setting the box on the table. "It's not much. You're here. That's more than I deserve." Sloane opened the package slowly. Inside was a pocket watch. Old, worn, beautifully simple. On the back, a small inscription. "Time doesn't undo what we did, but it gives us space to do better." Sloane blinked fast. "You really never do anything halfway, do you?" "Neither do you," Maya said. "That's why it hurts so much." They sat across from each other at the table, 2 cups of tea between them. Sloane traced the rim of her mug. "I haven't celebrated my birthday since I left Sterling International. Didn't feel like I'd earned anything worth celebrating." "You have," Maya said. "I see it every time I look at you. I'm still scared of what? That I'll slip. That I'll disappoint you. That you'll realize I'll never be enough to make up for what I did." Maya reached across the table, touched Sloane's hand. "I'm not asking you to make up for the past. I'm asking you to build something new with me slowly, day by day." Sloane looked up, eyes glassy. "Do you really believe we can?" "I don't know," Maya said, "but I want to believe. And that's a start." They sat in that softness for a long while. Then without a word, Maya stood, walked around the table, and sat beside Sloane. Their arms touched. Sloane didn't move, didn't breathe. Then Maya turned her face, lips close to Sloane's temple. "I want to kiss you," she whispered. Sloane turned to her, breath catching. "You can." Maya cubed her face, tilted it gently, and kissed her, not like a promise, not like a confession, but like a question. Sloane answered it with her mouth, her hands, the quiet sound she made when Maya leaned in deeper. This kiss wasn't soft like the last. It was wanting, honest, earned. Sloane pulled away just slightly, forehead pressed to Maya's. "Does this mean?" Maya closed her eyes. "It means I want to stop surviving you and start loving you again." Sloane exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for months. "Then let me love you right this time." Maya nodded slowly. "You can start by sleeping beside me tonight. Just that, nothing else." "I'll stay as long as you want," Sloane whispered. "Then get your coat." That night, they lay in Maya's bed, fully clothed, facing each other, hands entwined between them. Sloane whispered stories she'd never told anyone. About her mother's absence, about growing up feeling like a mistake dressed in designer clothing. Maya listened, then opened her own wounds. The guilt she'd carried for trusting Sloane to fast. The loneliness that had eaten her alive when Sloane disappeared from her life. And in the space between pain and presence, they built something raw and unshaped. Something that could one day be called love again. But outside their little world, something darker stirred. Vanessa Devereux hadn't disappeared. And she wasn't done. She'd seen the photos of Maya and Sloane at the poetry night. Heard the whispers about how the 2 women were close again. She watched from afar, waited, and smiled. Because while Sloane had walked away from the empire, she hadn't walked away from the consequences. And Vanessa had always known how to wait until the moment would hurt the most. They woke before the sun, not because of an alarm, not because of noise, but because something inside both of them had shifted. Sloane lay on her side, facing Maya in the soft gray person, watching the slow rise and fall of her chest beneath the blanket. Her hand rested loosely in Maya's, and she hadn't moved it all night. They hadn't kissed again, hadn't undressed each other, hadn't even dared to say, "I love you." But they'd held each other, and that had been more intimate than anything else. Sloane studied her now, the curve of her lashes, the way her lips parted slightly in sleep, the faint crease between her brows, like even her dreams, carried the weight of everything they hadn't said. "I want to be better for you," Sloane thought, "and I don't know if I'll ever be good enough, but I swear I'll spend the rest of my life trying." Maya stirred then, eyes fluttering open. For a second, she looked confused, like she'd forgotten where she was. Then her gaze landed on Sloane, and something in her face softened. "Hey," she whispered. "Hey," Sloane said back just as quietly. Maya's fingers curled slightly around hers. "You didn't run. You asked me to stay." Maya nodded, then leaned in slowly, pressed a soft kiss to Sloane's cheek. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't charged. It was a gesture of quiet trust, and it made Sloane's throat tighten more than any kiss on the lips ever had. But peace never lasted long in their world, and by the time the clock struck 10, everything began to fall apart. It started with a phone call. One Sloane didn't answer. The number was private, then another, and another. At first, she ignored them. Maya made breakfast. Sloane helped. They ate together at the small table, sunlight pouring and across the war would like something sacred. But then Maya's phone buzzed, a text from a blocked contact. "Check the news." Maya frowned, picking up her phone. Sloane watched her face slowly drain of color as she tapped the screen. "What is it?" Sloane asked, already standing. Maya turned the phone to her. There it was, splashed across the entertainment sites, the gossip blogs, even a few mainstream news outlets. Former billionaire Sloane Sterling secretly dating her but victim again. Below the headline photos, grainy but unmistakable, Maya and Sloane on the sidewalk, walking close, arms almost touching. Another of Sloane at Maya's door. And the worst, a photo from the poetry night. Maya introducing Sloane to someone. Sloane smiling down at her like she hung the stars. Sloane's breath caught. "No," she whispered. Maya had already opened another article. The headline read, "Sources say Sloane's redemption was all a setup again." And underneath it, a leaked email between Sloane Sterling and Vanessa Devereaux suggests the two remained in contact throughout her so-called redemption arc. Is this a second bet? A second manipulation? Is Maya Page falling for the same lie twice? Maya stood, her chair scraping against the floor. "Sloane, it's not true." "I know," Maya said quickly. "But the world doesn't." Sloane ran a shaking hand through her hair. "The email. There's no email. Vanessa must have forged it." Maya nodded. "I know, but no one else will." Sloane's mind spiraled. "I stepped away from everything. I haven't spoken to her in months, but she's smart and angry, and she knew exactly when to do this." Sloane's jaw clenched. "She waited until I was close to getting you back." Maya looked at her. "So, what do we do?" "I go public. I tell them the truth again." "Sloane, no," she said firmly. "I'm not going to hide anymore. I'm not going to let her win. And what if they don't believe you?" Sloane turned to her, eyes blazing. "Then let them not believe me. Let the world say what it wants. I only care about one person believing me." Maya stared at her, breathing fast. "You think I do? I hope you do." Maya closed the space between them. "I believe you," she whispered, "but I don't know if I can survive watching you be torn apart again. I'm not the one they'll go after." Sloane's voice cracked. "You are." Maya's throat worked. "I've survived worse. Not for me. Not again." "Then tell me what to do." Sloane paused. "Say you'll stay with me, even if it gets ugly, even if the headlines get cruel again. You know I can't promise that. Then just don't walk away before we fight." Maya stepped even closer, took Sloane's face in her hands. "I won't walk," she whispered. "But if we do this, if we tell the truth, it has to come from both of us together." Sloane nodded. "Then let's do it." They released a joint statement that night. No PR agent, no fancy press team, just Maya's words typed by Sloane's hands. Our story began with a lie, but the truth is what we're writing now. We are not perfect people, but we are trying slowly, fully, honestly, to become something better than the past we built. Whatever comes next, we face it together. The backlash hit immediately headlines. Shouting pundits, tweets, videos, threads. Some called Maya a fool. Others cast Sloane as irredeemably manipulative. But beneath the noise, something else began to surface. Strangers defending them. People change. Sloane didn't have to confess she'd already lost everything, yet she did. Let women choose love, even when it's messy. For the first time, Sloane didn't feel like she had to fight the world, only live in it as herself. Flawed, human, trying. That night, Maya kept her close on the corner of the couch, while Sloane scrolled through every vicious headline. Like penance. Stop reading, Maya murmured, kissing her hair. They don't know you like I do. I don't deserve you, Sloane said, voice breaking. Then earn me. Every day, Sloane whispered. I will. Even as she said it, Sloane knew the real test was ahead. Vanessa still hadn't appeared. And when she did, it wouldn't be simple revenge. It would be war. Sloane Sterling had always known it would end in fire. Not the poetic kind, no passion, lust, or longing. Actual fire. The kind that reduces reputations to ash and turns second chances into smoking wreckage. She just hadn't expected to be standing beside Maya when the match struck. The confrontation wasn't private. Vanessa Devereux never did small. She crashed the fundraiser. It was meant to be a quiet evening, a literacy gala hosted by the nonprofit where Sloane now worked part-time. Maya was there too, organizing book donations and greeting guests. It was the first public event they'd attended together since the scandal. They didn't kiss, didn't hold hands, yet everyone saw it anyway in the way Maya kept glancing over her shoulder, finding Sloane in the crowd. In the way Sloane looked at Maya like the whole world had finally stopped trying to ruin her. Then the doors opened and Vanessa walked in like a queen returning to a throne that had never belonged to her. Blood-red dress, snake-thin smile, eyes locked on Sloane. Time slowed. Sloane saw her, saw the danger, saw the performance already coiling behind her perfect posture. Maya's hand found hers instinctively. Don't, she whispered. Not here. But it was already happening. Vanessa reached the stage before security could stop her. She didn't need a microphone. Her voice carried like venom. Since we're all here to talk about words, she said, why don't we talk about the ones that were never meant to be heard? The room shifted. Sloane moved toward the stage. Maya close behind her. Vanessa smiled, triumphant. Did she tell you? She asked the crowd. That I created her. That everything she is, she learned from me. Stop, Sloane said. You're embarrassing yourself. Am I? Vanessa tilted her head. Or am I just telling the truth you're too scared to say? You loved hurting people, Sloane. You loved breaking them down and watching them beg for crumbs. Maya was just the first one you regretted. I regret everything I did with you, Sloane said, voice low and deadly. And I won't let you rewrite that. You can't rewrite the past, Vanessa said, but you can lie about it. That's what you've been doing, isn't it? Pretending you're redeemed, pretending she's forgiven you. I haven't, Maya said, stepping forward. Her voice didn't shake. Not fully, but that's none of your business. Vanessa turned to her. Sweetheart, he'll do it again. That's what people like her do. They seduce, they destroy, then they crawl back like martyrs. She's not crawling, Maya said. She's standing beside me. That's more than you ever did. A hush fell over the room. Vanessa blinked, thrown off by the steel in Maya's voice. You think she's changed? Vanessa hissed. You think this is real? I know it is, Maya said, because the old Sloane would have let you speak. The old Sloane would have tried to outsmart you, outcruel you. This one, she reached for Sloane's hand. This one just wants peace. Sloane looked at her. The fear that had been tightening around her chest all night unraveled. Vanessa scoffed. You think love makes you strong? Love makes you weak. It's the reason you lost your empire, your name, everything. And I'd lose it all again, Sloane said, stepping in front of Maya if it meant keeping her safe from people like you. You chose to be powerless, Vanessa spat. No, Sloane said. I chose to be human. Security reached the stage. The tension broke like glass. Vanessa was escorted out, hurling insults behind her. But the moment had already passed. Sloane turned to Maya, her hands still shaking. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't know she'd show up. You didn't have to, Maya said. She was always going to come back. The real test wasn't stopping her. It was choosing not to become her. Sloane closed her eyes, let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. I don't want to fight anymore. Then don't, Maya said. Come home with me. They left before the gala ended. Sloane didn't ask where they were going. She just followed Maya through the streets, heart pounding with something that felt dangerously close to freedom. When they reached Maya's apartment, she expected silence. Instead, Maya shut the door behind them and turned. Her voice was quiet, steady. Take off your coat. Sloane obeyed, pulse racing. Maya stepped closer. I want to look at you without noise, without headlines, without guilt between us. Sloane nodded, breath shallow. Okay. Maya lifted a hand, touched Sloane's jaw. You're not the woman I married. No, Sloane whispered, but I'm the woman who never stopped loving you. I know, Maya said. I just needed time to love her back. Then she kissed her. Fierce, full, honest. The kind of kiss that burned everything old to the ground. And Sloane kissed her back with every piece of the self she'd rebuilt for MASH. There was no rush, no performance, no fear. That night they undressed each other slowly, mapped each other's scars like scripture, made love like survivors, not of war, but of themselves. And for the first time in either of their lives, there was no lie in a room, no plan, no game. Just two women, raw, ruined, and still choosing each other anyway. The world didn't explode after the gala. There was no firestorm, no lawsuits, no dramatic fall from grace. It all ended quietly. Vanessa Devereux vanished from the news cycle just as fast as she'd entered it, swallowed whole by her own bitterness. The emails she leaked were exposed as fakes, traced back to a private account she had accessed illegally. Sloane didn't press charges. She didn't need to. The silence that followed was punishment enough. For once, the silence was kind. Sloane and Maya fell into something real, something steady. The headlines softened, the whispers faded, and neither of them cared about the noise anymore. They built a life the way people build trust, slowly with trembling hands and open hearts. Sloane never tried to buy Maya's love back. She showed up for it instead. Every day, quiet things. Waking early to walk Maya to the bookstore. Leaving handwritten notes in the pockets of Maya's sweaters. Learning how to cook her favorite breakfast without burning it. She never called it redemption. She never called it reparation. She called it love. Maya let herself be loved again. Gently, fearfully at first. But she did. She forgave Sloane in pieces. Not in one sweeping dramatic moment, but over cups of tea and shared stories and late-night laughter. And in time, the past stopped bleeding into the present. They didn't need to rebuild what they had. They created something new, stronger, truer. One morning in early spring, Sloane stood outside the bookstore, waiting for Maya to open up. She held a coffee in one hand and a folded piece of paper in the other. When Maya arrived, Sloane handed her the drink, kissed her cheek, and said, "Can we close early today?" Maya blinked. "Why?" Sloane smiled. "I have something I want to show you." They drove upstate back to the cabin. But this time, the energy wasn't heavy. There were no ghosts, no sharp words waiting between them. Only soft music playing from the car speakers and Sloane's stealing glances at Maya, who was singing along barefoot against the dashboard. "You've been quiet," Maya said when they pulled up to the house. You okay? Yeah. Sloane stepped out, opened Maya's door, just thinking about. Sloane didn't answer. She led Maya into the cabin where everything had been cleaned, repainted, made new. Maya looked around, stunned. Did you? I bought it, Sloane said. Not for me. For us. Maya's eyes widened. Sloane, this isn't a proposal. Sloane interrupted gently. Not yet. I just wanted to show you something. She took out the folded paper and handed it to Maya. It was a letter. Dear Maya, I used to think power was about control, about having the upper hand always. But the most powerful I've ever felt was when I knelt beside you in the dark and asked you to see me. Not the CEO, not the billionaire, just me. And you did, even when I didn't deserve it. You loved me with your eyes open, and every day, you give me the chance to try again. So this isn't a proposal. It's a promise. I will love you without lies. I will protect you without pride. I will build with you without fear. And when you're ready, if you ever are, I'll be waiting at the cabin with your favorite book and a ring in my pocket. No deadline, no pressure, just love. Maya's hands trembled slightly as she read. When she looked up, Sloane was watching her with that same expression she'd had the very first day they met. Confident, cautious, full of desire and restraint. Maya didn't speak. She walked to Sloane, pulled her close, kissed her like an answer. When they broke apart, Maya whispered, You'll be waiting with a ring. Sloane nodded. In my pocket. Maya leaned her forehead against hers. Then you should probably take it out. Sloane blinked. What? I'm saying yes. Sloane pulled back slightly. To what? To everything. Maya smiled. To the ring. To the cabin. To the bookstore mornings and burnt breakfasts and Tuesday night reading circles. To you? Sloane's breath hitched. You're sure? I've never been more sure. Sloane reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the box. Small velvet trembling. She opened it, hands shaking. Maya Page, will you marry me? Maya laughed through tears again. For real this time? Then yes. Yes, Sloane. I'll marry you. They kissed in the middle of the room where everything had once fallen apart. They kissed like the ending of a story that finally got it right. Imperfect, unvarnished, but real. When they held each other, Maya whispered, It wasn't the fire that ruined us. No, Sloane murmured. It was the lie. And now we only tell the truth. And they did from that day on with every touch, every word, every promise. It wasn't just a love story anymore. It was a life, and they chose it together, every damn day. If you enjoyed this content and want to support the channel in a special way, tap the thanks button below, the one with the heart and $sign icon. With super thanks, you can make a direct contribution to the channel, which helps me keep creating awesome videos for you.